Janet Ioli, and you're watching PowerTalks, Wise Words from Wise Women. In this video series, powerful women at the top of their game share their stories and their experience with you. And I'm thrilled to have one of these wise women with me here today, Laura Kraft. Thanks for being here with us, Laura.
It's great to be here.
Laura is the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Strategy and Investment ESG at Heitman, a multi-billion-dollar global real estate investment management firm. So I want to start out, Laura. I do this at the beginning of just about every session, is because I think we hear these titles, right? And we assume power and we assume something about you, but there's a journey and there's a story behind that title. So can you talk to us a little bit about your leadership story and how you got to where you are?
Sure, happy to. And I've had a number of titles along the way. I can't tell you how many, probably 10. So it's iterative. But in terms of how I got to where I got to, it's by thinking a little differently. When I got into the investment world, it was a clear path on how to go where you're going, a ladder. You go from an analyst to a senior analyst to, you become an asset manager at some point. And early in the journey, I realized that I don't think I want to be an asset manager. I want to do something different. I don't want to go in that ladder. How can I jump? And so I started thinking about what's important in the industry and maybe something that, no one else has that expertise. What is that newest thing? And so I became an expert in sustainability. Wow. And environmental, social, and governance issues. And it was at a time that those issues were just starting to take off in the industry. And it was about maybe 2 or 3 years later. So again, you have to think early. And it was about 2 or 3 years later, they came into focus for my company. And because I had this expertise, I got put into managing some projects related to this. And one project turned into, it's not just about this, but it's about how's our company organized around sustainability and around environmental, social, and governance issues. And so it kind of took me straight to the top of, being focused on kind of investment deals to now company organizational level, global level. How do you structure a program for a company? And so I think that, talking about leadership journey, you just have to think differently and, think about what is that next thing and try to get those skills and put yourself in the right place so that when a company is looking to go down that path, you're the person that's tapped.
There's so many gems of wisdom in what you just said, because I think often we think linearly. It's like, okay, here's the it's passive, right? Here's the path and here's what I've got to do. And I got to do this and that. And what you're saying is take a more strategic view as well. Is like, okay, scan the landscape and you found a niche, and then you became really good at this niche where not so many players were. And that's it takes a certain type of thinking in order to do that, thinking outside of the norm a little bit. So that's great. Now, what'd you learn from this?
I learned a tremendous amount. In the beginning, it felt a little uncomfortable thinking differently because, you're getting some pushback that it's not necessarily, people aren't up to speed with that line of thinking. So, I learned that you have to have conviction in what you want to pursue. And you have to understand how it ties back to the business. There always needs to be a business case.
Right.
And so it's combining those two, having conviction and understanding why there's a business value to it.
So now let me change gears a little bit and ask you this. Obviously you're a female in a relatively male-dominated industry, right? I would venture to say. What's been your biggest challenge, if any, as a female executive?
First, that I'm young sometimes, and that
age. It's not even a factor of a female, right? The age is also a factor.
Yeah, and then I also look younger. I think I sometimes look younger than I actually am. So sometimes it's age, and then sometimes it's that I'm the only female in the room. So it's both of those, and I think there is a little bit of a challenge to make sure that they're not looking at me like, oh, she's she doesn't look like us, and she's not the same age. I think there is that you have to overcome. But then if you are so focused on doing the job and doing it right, then it doesn't really matter what you look like, and it doesn't really matter how old you are.
Right. Right. And do you think that we spend a little more time ourselves focused on that and making assumptions than other people do? I don't know. I'm just curious. Sometimes we get in our own head and we're thinking, "Oh my goodness, they're focused on this or that." And what do you think, just in terms of a head game a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I think we are sometimes our worst critic, but that can also be our best motivator, because it makes me want to bring my A game to
Yeah.
any meeting I go to make sure that they can't say what I'm thinking about myself, that maybe I'm not supposed to be there. I want to make sure that I squash all of that,
Right.
that I am bringing a lot to the table in whatever meeting I go to.
Well, that's great. And that is funny. So now how do you continue to overcome that head game of your own, right? That challenge that you perceive that may or may not be true, and probably is, right? People may be making a judgment initially. So what have you done to overcome that in your head?
I think that the more you go through it, the less it bothers you. So it doesn't bother me that much anymore. I go to the whatever meeting I'm going to, and I just, I bring it. So I think I'm less and less worried about that these days. But I would say when I was, years ago, when I was new to the table, it did bother me. Um, but I think the older you get, the less you care what other people think.
Right. And there's also the credibility, right? Factor. You've built your credibility, I would think,
Yes.
over time. Now, career, right? So you're on this career path, obviously very self-motivated. You've kind of surveyed the landscape and figured out what's needed and created kind of a niche for yourself. What's the best piece of career advice you ever received?
Um, Always think about, what are you passionate about? But I sometimes don't like saying that word.
Mm,
It's like, what do you really care about?
mhm.
Where do you want to be working in this industry 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and stick to it? So I think that there were times where I was like, oh, I have this expertise and I could go do this and be really successful, but I really didn't like the job. And so I think that, I'd rather stay in an industry and maybe it take a little bit longer, but I'm in the industry for long term.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And sometimes we're good at something, but we don't necessarily want to do it. So there's that catch 22 there, right? I'm really good at something and people draw me into it, but that's not really what I want to do. So balancing those two things. Now, what career advice would you give women?
Uh, I think it's knowing yourself and
Mm,
speaking up. I think it's so too often that we assume other people know what we want
mhm.
when they really don't.
Right.
And so you need to be upfront with that. And I think when you are upfront, people want to help you. But when you don't give them an aim on how to help you, then they don't know how to help you. And then sometimes you can just get stuck in this in between of non movement.
I love the way you say that, that in between. It's so funny. I always say this, that we're all guilty of this, think that people are mind readers. That everybody knows what's in our head, what our intention is, but they don't. They only know what we say and what we do, right? So if you don't tell someone, they don't know, which is kind of funny. And that's a great point. Now, what you said, know yourself. What do you mean by that?
Oh gosh, I mean it's a long answer. I mean, I think you have to understand what makes you tick. You need to understand your strengths. I know for me personally, I'm good at some things, I'm bad at others. The things I'm good at and the things I'm passionate about, I'm amazing at.
Mhm,
And so I like to stay in that place.
mhm.
It's going back to like understanding the strengths and weaknesses. And some people focus on their weaknesses and trying to bring them up, and I think you can only really bring them up to average or so. But if you're focused on your strengths, then you can like make them like a superstar power. And I really do believe in that. And then the things that you're not good at, you just say, hey, I'm really not good at this. I'll try to do my best. But is there someone else on the team that's really good at this? Let's work together.
Right. I always ask my guests on this show to give an inspirational quote. What inspirational quote has inspired you and you would like to leave with the folks watching here today?
Yeah, I had to think about this one because you sent it through. And so I
Yeah.
started to think about what are some of the quotes that I've come across that have inspired me. And I'll bring it and keep it real simple. A Dr. Seuss quote.
Mhm.
You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose.
Wow.
So it's simple, you know?
So what speaks to you about that?
Um, that it's exciting in the sense that I'm not stuck in a box.
Mhm.
And so I get to decide my passions, what I want to focus on, and where I'm going. And if all that's aligned, then I'm excited to get up in the morning every day. I'm excited to do my work. I enjoy it. I don't think there'll ever be a day when I don't work just because I enjoy it so much.
Right.
I'm just if I'm not liking what I'm doing, it's my fault.
I love the way you articulate that. Thanks, Laura. That's great. It's very inspirational. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your journey. So thank you very much, my wise woman, Laura, for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. It's been so much fun.